Welcome. This is the recording of the arc of a coaching session and the 22 coaching skills.
So you're joined by myself, Mike Hutchins.
And it's me, Erin Hutchins, and Mike and I felt like it was important for us to record this. So you're listening to this after day one of module one, and then coming prepared to talk about the arc of a coaching session and the skills in class on day two.
So we're giving these to you right now, and we're giving you all the skills that you're going to need for your coaching life, and certainly through this program. And the idea is that you have a basic grasp of the skills, and you'll be practicing them a lot tomorrow. You'll be practicing them a lot throughout the rest of this program. For now, we just want you to understand, why this skill is important, what it sounds like, and when you might use it.
Okay, so let's first start off with the arc of a coaching session. This is really important because this is what makes coaching different from other types of conversations. And in this arc, we call it the 10-80-10. So in the first 10% of a coaching session, you're really taking the time to co-create with your client. You might ask them, what do we need to design together in order to have a successful coaching relationship? Things that you might want to design, we've talked about in class, are confidentiality. You may design that you'll be coming in to jump in the conversation at times. Also in this 10% is, we want you to take the time to really name the topic. What does this person want coaching on today? And you might just start by saying that. Actually, we recommend you say that. What would you like coaching on today? Not what do you want to talk about? There might be also an opportunity to use clearing here, which we're going to go into more of as a skill in a minute. And then anything else like checking in with their homework around, what did you learn from your last session? What do you want me to know about that now? And they may want to continue with that as a topic, or they may want to talk about something different. So make sure you check in with them around and get really clear on what are we talking about today in the coaching session.
So that's the first 10%. So at the end of that 10%, you've established how you're going to work together in this session. You're clear on what the coaching topic is, and you're ready to go to actually get into the coaching, which is what happens in the 80%.
So on this PowerPoint slide here, we have some words that really articulate what happens in the 80%. So this is really where the bulk of the coaching happens, where you're exploring with the client, you're helping them be in a discovery process. You are listening at mostly level 3, asking powerful questions, using the coaching skills to help them become more aware of how they're in relationship with this topic. So really in this 80%, it's all about exploring without an agenda. So you don't know where you're going, you're just exploring with the client, meeting them where they are, and you might notice a lot of insights come up for the client in this 80%.
So in this program, you're going to learn a lot more about, this is sort of the being of coaching in the 80%. You're looking at exploring beliefs, you're looking at underlying assumptions, you're looking at emotions, you'll be working with emotions, values, purpose, all of that. And the idea is that, assuming you've done a good job coaching in that 80%, something new will emerge. It could be a new perspective, a new mindset, something different has been created. And that then leads you, if you're, again, good coaching is you're weaving that new way of looking at their situation into the last 10%.
So the idea is that the action and accountability in this last 10% is really grounded in the 80%. Okay, so it's an inspired action that they're taking. It's a resonant action from the 80%. So in this last 10%, the client may take an action or accountability, or maybe you'll leave them with a reflective question, which you're going to learn about in the coaching skills on this recording. Again, the important thing is that the distinction between this type of arc, so the 10-80-10 versus a mentoring or advising conversation, is typically we go from the first 10% of, what do you want help with, to the last 10% around what are you going to do about it. And this is what really makes coaching different, is that 80% of that exploration, where then the action or the accountability comes from the 80%.
So this is the structure. Just start thinking about this when you're coaching, and we're going to enforce this as you go through the program. We'll be giving you, sort of 2-minute warnings to start thinking about at the end of a coaching practice, as you'll see tomorrow, to start thinking about, how do I move this to action? And so the idea is that coaching requires both the being and the doing for change to happen.
So keep this in mind as we go through the coaching skills right now. You might look at, where do these coaching skills fit into this arc?
Yeah, and you'll see this come back as we go through this. So here is the list of the skills. So it may look a bit overwhelming right now. We are planning to go through all of these fairly briefly, and just know that different skills will kind of have their moment in the program. So some of them you're going to really see, like reframing. We're going to spend a lot of time in module 2 looking at, and then, when we do module 3 with presence coaching, you'll see a lot more with skills like asking permission and embodiment, for example. So get set, ready to go.
Let's go. So the first skill here is accountability. And this is what we were talking about. You see the arc here come up again, that this really takes place in the last 10% of the coaching session. So just to say again, it's like the accountability or the action is really grounded in the 80%. It's getting created from the 80%. You want it to be resonant for the client, something that they want to do, not something they feel like it's just another thing on their to-do list. So it's really important that the client is really resonating with the action. And here's the deal with accountability, is that you don't need to ask them what would they like to commit to, or what would they like to do. You can just ask them what would they like to commit to, or what would they like to do. You don't have to come up with the accountability for your client.
And if you're really listening, it'll start to emerge. They'll hopefully have an inspiration and say, as I'm saying this, I know I need to speak to my boss. I know I need to have this conversation. So you're listening for it in that 80%, and hopefully it will start to emerge.
So here are some questions that you may want to ask. What would you like to commit to doing from this coaching session? Okay, or what will support you in making this real? You may want to put a date or to that and ask them, so when would you like to do this by? And then you may want to ask them, what does accountability or follow-up look like? If it's something that they need to be held accountable, you might ask them, would you follow up with me in between our sessions to let me know how that action went? What did you learn?
Sometimes it's good to do a check-in towards the end of the session using a scale of 1 to 10. How ready are you to commit? To get a sense of what's real here. Sometimes you get clients that'll say, yeah, sure, I'll do that, no problem. And you're kind of like, how real is this? Like, how realistic is it they're going to do this? So sometimes you may just want to check in and keep the conversation real.
So the next skill is acknowledgement. And here we are specifically defining this skill as the gifts, the strengths, and the qualities that you see in the client. So this is really helping them to connect with their own unique qualities and strengths, sometimes that they don't see in themselves. We want you to keep it very simple. It has to be heartfelt. If you don't feel like it's heartfelt and you believe it, don't say it, because it will come across in an inauthentic way. So when this skill can be offered at any point in the coaching, particularly when there's vulnerability present with the client. And you're really just acknowledging the strength or the quality that you see in them. So examples here are on, you are resilient, or I see how committed you are to change. Okay, so what we don't want you to do is justify why you're saying it. It takes the power of the acknowledgement away. So keep it short and simple, maybe five or 6 words or less.
Yeah, if you catch yourself saying, obviously no one likes to do this, so, and then sort of preambling before you get to it, as Erin said, just land it in a short sentence.
This is probably one of the most underutilized skills in organizations. We don't spend a lot of time acknowledging people's qualities. Typically, if something's gone well, we'll just go to the next thing very quickly. This is actually taking time to slow down, to say, I see you. Here's what I'm seeing you demonstrate through this process. And it really helps the client see some of their own strengths and gifts that they have.
And just note this is different to sensing that you would have done today. So this is, again, is looking at the gifts, the qualities and the strengths, whereas sensing, you're looking more about the energy, the emotions, and we'll come back to that one in a minute. Asking permission. So this is something that you may choose to do if you are sensing that there is a sensitive topic and you're not sure whether the client wants to go there. So you may just request permission and say, is this somewhere that you'd like to go now? Is this somewhere you'd like to focus? It can also be used as a time tool. Like if you've got 5 minutes before the end of the session and you know that the person you're coaching has a big meeting coming up and you're sensing a lot of sensitivity around something, you may just bring that to their attention, because what you don't want to do is leave them at the end of the session in a state that is suboptimal for where they're going.
We're going to talk more about this in Module 3, particularly when we introduced you to working with emotionally charged issues. Asking for permission is really important. And
final point is, you don't need to be doing this all the time. So coaching by its very nature is very personal and sensitive. So obviously you don't want to be asking that before you ask any question.
Okay, bottom lining. This is a really just very utilized skill in coaching. We can't underscore that enough. In a coaching conversation, we want to keep the coaching focused. Okay, so we keep it focused. We don't let the client just go into their story and talk for a long time and get off track. So especially when they're ranting or they're venting or they're giving us way too many details that we don't need, we as coach want to get in there and get to like the bottom line to say, what's the bottom line here? Or what about this is really important? What is this really about? What do you want me to know? So it helps your client get to the core of what's really going on, and it's going to help you stay focused. When you're not using the skill and the client is giving you too many details, you're really not coaching because you're getting off track. So this is something we're going to do a lot of practicing on in the classroom.
Next is challenging. So you might challenge a belief, or you might challenge them with an action. So let's look at the first one. If you're sensing that the client is seeing something and they may have a blind spot, you may want to challenge that. So you may ask, is it really helpful for you to think this way? Or is that really true? How do you know that? Or who told you that? And again, you don't want to be attached to this. You're offering this to see whether, because as humans we have blind spots. And so you're there to challenge whether or not that is true.
You can also challenge one of their actions, if particularly if you're noticing that the client's avoiding a difficult conversation or they're avoiding doing a presentation. You might, as a coach, say, I challenge you to have that conversation with your boss straight after our session, or I challenge you to do this presentation. And here's the idea with challenges that they can say yes, no, or you can offer a counter offer. So if they say no, then you can say, well, what will you do? So the idea here is it's challenging their current way of thinking, and in some ways just having them think about, well, maybe I could commit to doing that. Okay, so if they do say no, I won't do that, then you will ask them, well, what will you do instead?
Championing. So this is when you believe in your client to express that. And it can be as simple as saying, I believe in you. So you may notice in one session, a client is very resonant and they're coming to the session full of optimism and joy. And then for some reason, something has happened between that and the next coaching session. So it's like you're holding their potential and you're holding what's possible for them, and you're reminding them of what their potential is, because sometimes they don't see that in themselves.
This is different from offering your opinion or judgment. So as Mike just said, it's got to be authentic. It's like you hold a higher belief of them. You want them to step into something greater here. And it's just acknowledging that, wow, you really see this in them, and I want to champion that particular quality as a coach.
It's really helpful when there's a lot of self-doubt. You know, if you've got a senior leader that has had incredible success and for some reason they've just hit a roadblock, then just keep reminding them of what their potential is.
Checking in. So again, this is probably one of the most utilized coaching skills. And this is to make sure that you are on the topic that the client wants to talk about. So a way that the way this sounds like is just, let's say you're in the middle of a coaching session, you might want to say, I want to check in with you around, what are we talking about here? Or sounds like we got a bit off track. Where would you like to focus? Okay, there's an example here. Like you started talking in the session about delegation, and now we're talking about your daughter. Where would you like to focus? Okay, or you noticed a shift in their energy or shift in the conversation. You might say, just want to check in with you right now. What's going on? What's going on right now with you? So you can use this as many times as possible to really check in to say, are we on track? Okay, this is going to make sure that it's the client's agenda and not your agenda as a coach.
Yeah, there are gold nuggets that happen as the client is speaking, and you'll notice this when you get coached as well. It's like the breadcrumbs that get dropped along the way, and you don't want to miss those because they could be the treasure trove for the client. So you're punctuating your coaching session with the skill of checking in to just pause and just check in and say, what's happening right now? What are you noticing? What just showed up? And sometimes you actually, you find gold in those moments.
Okay, clearing. So this typically comes in the first 10%. I had mentioned it when we introduced the ARC. And this is a skill to be utilized. Let's say your client has just come from a meeting and they were just triggered with something and they have so much to say about it. And so you might say, okay, client, I'm going to give you 2 minutes right now just to clear what happened in that meeting, to get your emotions out. And I'm going to time it. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and then we'll transition to coaching. So it may be that that's what I want to talk about, is what happened in that meeting, but it may not be. So what you don't want to risk is assuming that that's what they want to talk about. So after they're done clearing, after that 2 minutes, you might want to say, okay, so would you like to focus the coaching on this, or would you like to talk about something else today?
I'll give you a personal example. When I first started coaching, and I was coaching a senior executive, and it was a 45-minute coaching session, and the client came into the session and was ranting for a good 20 minutes about the meeting they'd just come out of, because that was kind of where they were at. And so I was coaching that, thinking, oh, this is a good topic. And then with about 5-10 minutes to go, the client then said, and anyway, my topic for today is, I was like, okay, we have 5 minutes left. It's your job as coach to manage that. So that was a hard lesson learned for me. And that's why we have this skill of getting absolutely clear at the beginning. Is this what you want coaching on?
This is also a skill you don't need to use every time. So you don't have to start off your session by, is there anything that you need to clear or say to get present? And you can absolutely do that, but you don't have to. Really use it when you sense that they're just coming in to the coaching session frazzled, or they're not grounded and they need some time to get present before you begin.
I'll let you do this one.
Okay, embodiment. So this is a big skill. We're going to cover mostly this in module 3. But here's a scoop on this skill, is that you're going to learn how to help your client connect with what is happening in their body as they talk about whatever they are experiencing. So we have this saying in coaching around the body doesn't lie. So the body will reveal actually the truth of what is going on. So right now you could use this skill by asking, what do you notice that's showing up in your body? Or if that language doesn't resonate with the client, you might say, so where do you feel that? Or where do you experience that? Or what are you noticing that's happening right now? So pay attention to their breathing, to their body posture, maybe hand gestures. Okay, you might even ask them to say, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes, or an invitation to stand up or walk around, put their hand on their heart. So it's always an invitation, where they could say, no, that's, I don't want to do that. But the idea here is to slow them down so they can connect with what's happening internally.
So you experience your emotions through the body, and coaching is much more than a cerebral exercise. So for now, just having an awareness that there is a lot going on. If you're doing good coaching, there's a lot going on beyond the head.
And as you progress in your coaching journey and move towards more intermediate advanced level, you will be doing a lot more embodiment and really looking at, how do I work with this person's nervous system? All right, so let's go to intuition. So intuition is just like it says here, it's a gut feeling. Some people experience intuition in their bodies in their stomach. Some people experience it in their chest or in their head. So maybe start noticing, where do you experience it? When you have an intuition that comes up for you, what happens in your own body? So we want you to practice blurting your intuition in coaching sessions. So when you have that gut reaction or that sense, you say it and offer it. So it's very much an offering of intuition.
And the big caution here, underscore, is do not be attached to it. So there is an invitation to share what it is that you sense, but it's easy to think that you know what the client leads, and then there's this idea of leading them. So if something isn't landing for the client, then let it go. Don't hold on to something. If you say, no, you definitely are frustrated, or you definitely avoiding this conversation here. If they're resisting that a lot, let it go. And then just be curious and say, okay, so if it's not that, what is it? So
really sense what's happening. If you have one, you might say, it sounds like you're avoiding this right now. And if they say, yeah, then go with that. And if they say, no, I'm not avoiding it, then don't be attached, let that go and keep coaching. So jumping in, this skill is the act of bottom lining. So let's just say that again. It's the act of bottom lining. So it's a way to jump into the client's story in service of keeping them on track. The reason why we have two different skills of jumping in and bottom lining is because we want you to practice the act of it. So find some words where you can jump into the conversation to keep it focused. You might say something like, I'm going to jump in here. Or actually, stop for a second. You're giving me too many details that I don't need. What is important here? How else do you like to jump in?
I just got used to saying I'm going to jump in. It sounds playful. And, when I first started coaching, I would allow the client to talk for a long time. And they are actually looking to you. And again, we talked earlier about co-creating the relationship and designing that you're going to do this. But it helps them stay focused. And, if they're paying good money for a coaching session, you're helping them get what they want. And, as humans, we have a tendency to give a lot of extraneous information. We drift. It's the she said, he shared. She sells seashells on the seashore. She said, he said, and sort of getting off topic. And so you just want to keep jumping in. sort of similar to checking in and getting clear and focused around helping them get what they want.
There's a distinction here between jumping in and interrupting.
Yeah.
So if you feel like this is rude, because you were not brought up this way to jump into conversations, we want you to know there's a distinction here. Jumping in to a coaching conversation is in service of the client and keeping it focused. Interrupting is more about you as a coach. So you need to interrupt to understand. And jumping in here, the distinction is you're jumping in service of helping the client, as Mike was saying, get what they want or move towards their goals.
And the good news in coaching is you don't actually need to understand a lot about the client. You establish from today, they're the expert in their lives. So you don't need to connect all the dots for them. You're helping facilitate them connecting the dots for themselves.
Okay, levels of listening. We did this one in class. We'll just talk very briefly about it again. So we have 3 different levels, level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is really listening to our own internal judgments. We're listening to in a way that self-referential, to talk about our own experience, or it can be we're offering sympathy.
Level 2, we're focused on the topic. So we're gathering data, facts, and information. As we just said, you don't actually need much of that. So you want to be able to name the topic at the beginning of the session. That's kind of got a level 2 feel about it. You want to be able to remember and be clear around what their accountability is and homework if they're going to do something. You may want to remember specific, if they're naming values, if they're naming things, beliefs that they hold, and you'll learn this through the program. Like, those are some things that you do want to hold on and play back, but you certainly don't need to be playing back lots of details.
Yeah, you probably need to listen around 10% in level 2, not a lot, 5 to 10% to get the keywords and information that you need. They're really important stuff.
And that's really good news, because it releases a lot of headspace for you to focus on level
3. So in level 3, we're really listening for the emotions. We are really listening into the silence. We're looking for body language. We're looking for what are the patterns that you're hearing. What are the assumptions that are being said? What's not being said? So we can, in a way, we're listening here to the whole person. Okay, so if level 2 is what is being said, level 3 is how the client is saying it. And there's some skills above we're going to talk about in a minute as we go to those skills that are going to help you meet your client where they are after you've listened to them at each of those levels.
And just to be clear, in level 3, this is not about validating. So you're not saying I agree, I disagree, or I know, things like that, or I understand. You're really just using your senses to say what it is that you see, what you hear, all of that. Metaphors. So this is a big one. We're going to do a lot of work with metaphors in this program. It is one of the most useful skills for your clients to help connect with things that matter to them in a non-literal way. So we hold our clients creative and resourceful, and this is really one way that we're trying to connect with their creativity. So once you hear a metaphor, and again, just be listening for your clients. They're going to be using them all the time, and it's up to you to jump on them. If they don't, then start using language like, what's that like? Or paint a picture for me, describe to me, or imagine. If you use those words, there's a reasonable chance your client will look up and they'll start getting visual and start providing metaphors for you to work with. Once you get a metaphor,
once you get a metaphor, you want to play in that metaphor and just in a playful manner. So if someone's saying, it feels like there's a tug of war, you might say, oh, so when you're tugging on that rope, what does that feel like? Okay, how hard is the other person pulling? Where are you in that rope? So you're kind of getting into the experience of what are they experiencing in that metaphor. So you might say, like, who's winning here? Let's play with that for a second. Okay. So again, you're helping them get into the experience of it. So if your client gives you a metaphor, let's say they give you, it feels like a tug of war, make sure you use their words. Instead of, if they say it feels like a tug of war and you say, I don't know, it feels like you're going in different directions or whatever it might be, stick to their language. Another best practice here is they look at it like golden nuggets when they offer you metaphors. Grab onto those and explore. If they don't offer you a metaphor and your intuition is coming up with one, you might offer it to them and say, oh, wow, it sounds like you're stuck in the mud here. And like intuition, if that doesn't land or resonate with them, you just let go of it. And if they say, no, it's not like I'm stuck in the mud, and all you have to say is, well, what does it feel like instead? So it's very much an offering or a way of opening a door with your client to get them to express and experience whatever it is that they're feeling in a metaphorical manner.
So you're almost doing this sort of parallel universe of here's the metaphor and here's the reality. And you're looking to create those parallels between the two. So if they say I'm stuck in the mud, you may say, well, what does the mud represent? They may say, well, it's my life at the moment at work. So you're looking to pull the two together, and ultimately the metaphor will use up its life and you'll be ready to move on to something else.
I think we do another MCG call on this.
Yeah.
So you'll get more on metaphors on your MCG call. Naming it, a really important coaching skill, is something you can use throughout the whole arc of the coaching session, is just naming naming whatever you're hearing in the conversation. So this is particularly useful when you do inner critic work in module 2. When you hear the inner critic come up, you're going to want to practice naming it with your client. So that might sound like, well, it sounds like there's another voice in this conversation. Let's put a name to that. Oh, it's the voice of doubt. Okay, so we've just named it the voice of doubt. It could be that they're experiencing frustration. So you might say, let's name whatever you're experiencing. Okay, I'm experiencing frustration. So you're really clear on what it is you're talking about, and it helps bring more awareness to the client around what they're experiencing.
Yeah, the idea of name it and tame it. It's almost like the client comes in, and if their awareness is low, to use a metaphor, they feel like they're in the fog. And your job as coach is to help put some stakes in the ground. Think of them about being on a journey with your client. You want these reference points that will make the client feel like they have more control over their lives, rather than using kind of like, well, what's this or what's that? You want to get specific around the things that are important to them.
So hang in there with us. We have a few more left to go through. We've talked about para and parrot phrasing in class today. So just to underscore some of the important things here, we want you to, when you're listening at level 2, you're really listening for the key information data. And then parrot phrasing is just playing back what you heard using the client's words.
You're in a much safer, cleaner place if you're just using the client's words. And it's your job as coach to help them make sense of their words rather than you embellishing it with your own.
And there's a couple examples here to read through.
Yeah.
Powerful questions. We talked about this in class. Here's a reminder. Keep them short, simple. Keep them more general so they can have a more broad response. Open-ended, they're focused on the person, and they are present and future focused. That's one of the reasons why we don't use why questions, because right now, at least in where you are in your coaching journey, is why can feel somewhat judgmental. Sometimes they just don't know why, and that's kind of the why they're coming to talk to you, because they want to explore. It also can send them back to the past. So a lot of what questions here, we like what questions, how questions, maybe who, or even visioning questions like imagine. So your questions are present and future focused. Here's some examples that you could just have in your back pocket if you're getting lost, that are all really good questions to use.
Yeah, they're kind of universals. You can use these really at any point if you're stuck in a coaching session.
The other thing about powerful questions is we want you to create them from the moment.
Yeah.
So we use sensing statements, which we're going to go into in a minute, as your bridge to your question. So if you think about the sensing statements as like you're meeting your client where they are, and then the powerful questions points them to where they're going to look next. So in this example, it's really important to look at, where's the pointing? Be conscious of when I meet them where they are, then I'm going to create my question in the moment. And one of my mentors once said to me, you won't ever know what question you're going to ask until the moment arises. So it's going to feel hard in the beginning because we're changing the way your brain is responding, and that's really normal. And the more you do this, the more natural it will become, and you'll build confidence in just being able to create your questions from the moment.
That's really why we have the coaching mindset of being present, agile, and curious, because that's really where your questions come from. Staying with questions. So a reflective question is a question that you may ask at the end of a session. So it may be that the client isn't ready for some action. Maybe there's a lot of emotion, maybe they're grieving. You may not sort of jump in and say, okay, so what are you going to do? It may not be appropriate to do that at that point. So the idea is that you offer them a question that's based around something that you noticed in the coaching session for a deeper reflection.
So this is something that they can't answer in the moment. Typically, this comes in at the last 10%. Like as Mike said, you could, this is almost as important as the action that they're taking. So sometimes you might offer a reflective question in conjunction with the action. Sometimes it might just be a reflective question on their own. But it's really pointing to the big T, which you're going to learn about in this module. It's pointing to what is the underlying pattern or assumption or belief or emotion that is manifesting with many different symptoms. So we're pointing them in the reflective question to sit and think about that, around how it's going to help them reflect and grow more deeply. Okay, so we're going to be practicing a lot of this in this module.
Next up is reframing and visioning. And again, module 2 will cover reframing in a lot more detail. This is the skill of reframing, is helping your client see their topic from a different perspective. So it's not reframing the topic, because the topic is what it is, right? It's something that is out there that they're stuck with. But what you are helping them do is see it in a different way. So you're helping them shift their perspective. Ideally, it's their reframe, not yours. So you may say, let's imagine for a moment you were in this role, or let's imagine for a moment that you didn't have this issue, or what's another way of looking at this? And see what comes up from there. It's tempting to want to give the perspective and say, well, what does it look like if you were going to be in charge? And you're sort of like throwing too much at, you're maybe giving veiled advice. So just be cautious and try and get it to come from them so that they own it.
We're going to do a lot more of reframing in module 2. Our whole module is based upon reframing exercises, because from a neuroscience perspective, this is one of the most useful skills around how to rewire the brain and create new healthy neural pathways for the client.
And then visioning there, it's a form of reframing, but it's got a future orientation. So you're sort of presencing the future by saying, let's imagine 10 years from now, what do you want this to look like? What do you want people to be saying about you? What's your legacy? And hopefully that helps them get unstuck in the present moment.
Self-managing, we talked about in class today. This is really a way to self-manage yourself at a level 1. We just feel like, especially for new coaches who are trying to get it right, they'll be in their level 1 a lot, and that's very normal. We want you just to be transparent about it and honest. And you might just say like, hey, I'm getting stuck here. Give me a second. Or you might just say, I feel like I'm trying to craft my question, but it's not coming out. What should I be asking you? Or I noticed that what you just said is triggering me into my own experience of this, and I want to share that with you, but I need to get back to you. So this is a way you're welcome to do that out loud. You can do it silently if you can manage yourself that way, but it's just practice. It's a conscious strategy to help practice recovering from level 1 back to level 2 or 3.
So if you think awareness, choice, transformation, which is what our program stands for, you know, by being transparent and in the class, especially verbalizing that, it's a way for you to become aware of where you're at. And once you're there, you're then able to choose how you want to operate differently. And think about it as you're in partnership with your client. So sometimes if you say, I checked out for a minute, I'm not sure what to ask you, let them pick up the slack and don't feel like you have to do it all for yourself. You're demonstrating that you're being real.
There's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves to feel like we always have to know what to say. And that's one of the hardest things in the beginning as a new coach, is getting over ourselves and being able just to be real and honest about, actually, like I'm trying to figure out what to say, but I'm not sure what to ask you. Where are you now? And just the more you can practice that, the real and more honest the conversation becomes. So sensing statements, I talked a little bit about this with powerful questions. Sensing statements is like your bridge to the powerful question. It's a way to meet your client where they are, wherever they are. So you're using your senses. You might say, I'm sensing, I'm hearing, I'm noticing, I'm observing, I'm seeing. Okay, here's some other examples. Like, I'm sensing confusion. You seem or look confused. I'm noticing your voice shifted here. I'm hearing frustration. It sounds like, so these are like offerings. That's why we have sensing statements, because it's an offer to what we're seeing or hearing or noticing or observing, versus saying, you're frustrated, or you don't have it together. That sounds more of a judgment, versus when we offer a sense, our sense of it is like we're less attached to being right. And then the client can say yes, no, and then that's where you create your questions. So if you're sensing that client's frustrated, you might say, I'm sensing you're frustrated. And the client says, yeah. Then you might say, so what does frustration look like to you? See how you just built from the client? What you don't want to go is say, you're frustrated, and here's why you're frustrated, because you keep talking about this topic and you keep going around in circles. So you've already now imposed that on your client.
It's like every human has the right to own their own emotions, and it's not up to us to tell them what they're feeling. So a good way to practice this one is stick on a movie and put it on silent and just observe. And a good actor will have done their own work and helping you to think about what is really going on with this character right now. Like, how are they feeling? And just all you're doing is building that muscle of sensing. And it's like the foundation for everything else that you're going to do in coaching. And it will demonstrate to your client that you're connected and tethered throughout the session.
Okay, silence. Maybe we could all take a moment to take a breath and pause for a second and slow down. And that's exactly what silence is in a coaching conversation. If you notice that you are doing most of the talking as the coach, you're not making enough space for the client, and you're not making enough space for silence. Okay, so if you notice, if you're somebody that talks a lot and is not comfortable with silence, we want you to practice this skill even more so. You might even count to 5 in your head before you respond, just so you're slowing it down and allowing the client to respond. Anything you want to say about this one?
If you get the opportunity, and you will in this program when you get mentor coached, where you listen to a recording of your coaching. And this was a tough one for me, but it's to listen to that and ask yourself, what skill am I using right now? And the harder question sometimes is, am I actually coaching? And, as humans, we just have a tendency to want to fill the silence. And actually what we're doing is taking the client away from their own experience. So you want to keep them resonant. You want to keep them in their experience. the whole time. Just one other thing to add to that, this can be very subtle. So sometimes we preamble before we ask a powerful question. The reason why I'm going to ask you this is because, or we ask the question and then we answer it for them. We say, so what's important about this? Is it that you don't want to go and take this role? Is it that you... So ask the question and then stop. If they don't get the question, they'll let you know, and you'll have plenty of time to ask more questions and do other things, but don't fill the silence because it feels uncomfortable. And this takes practice for sure. You'll build your capacity to stay with silence and spaciousness.
The last skill here we're going to talk about today is taking charge. So this, in a way, is really being able to use your own authority as a coach in service of your client. Okay, so this is when the coach needs to jump in and take charge to keep the client get or maybe stay grounded. So you might be slowing down and simplifying the process. You might use naming it, acknowledging or champion, or maybe checking in. So this is another example of, I'll give you an example. If you become too passive as a coach and you're not taking charge by saying, well, hold on a second, let's go back to what you just said. Or I'm going to step in for a moment here. If you're not doing that and you're just becoming more of a passive coach, the client will have a tendency to open up and start storytelling and giving you too much information. So the distinction here is there's a distinction, which maybe you want to talk about, is taking charge and taking control.
So control is really you're taking over a client's agenda and you're starting to lead. And we're absolutely saying that taking charge is not that. So taking charge is more you're taking charge of the process, the coaching process, more explicitly. So I'll give an example. I was coaching someone recently who had such dissonance and low level of awareness. They were really struggling with something that they were going through. So it was my responsibility here to really just slow it right down, literally slow it right down, get them breathing, and start putting things into buckets. So it was, okay, let's just put this here for now. We can come back to this. What do we want to call this? So the skill of naming it. Let's just leave this here for a moment. And that enabled the client to then start reconnecting again in their brain to their prefrontal cortex so that they could actually start thinking again.
So this is a way of using your vocal tone, your body language as a coach to offer, to be present and show up that way, that you're fully present as a partner in this coaching session. This is not about taking charge and leading them where you want to take them. So this is not about, taking charge to get them where you want them to go. It's about more using your own presence as a coach. If you can't hold your client as creative and resourceful, and you don't think that they're in control of their thoughts, that's when you also need to take charge as a coach and refer them to a different form of a different form of some sort of therapeutic experience, like offering or referring them to a therapist. And we'll talk more about that in class.
So those are the skills. So we don't expect you to be experts having watched this, but we do expect you to have some awareness of them. So we'll be doing demos throughout the program. And, we do expect you to go, oh, look, there was taking charge. Oh, look, there was a powerful question, or there was checking in, so that you can then, when you see them being used, you can then start incorporating them into your coaching. So we give you all the skills at the beginning. It's almost like if you imagine you've just started your journey, we filled your backpack. If you imagine going on a hike, we filled your backpack with all the skills, and you're gonna carry them with you for the rest of your journey. So good luck with these.
Thanks for sticking with us on this call, and we'll talk more about this in class.